It is a disgrace that Reform are still blaming NATO for Russia's aggression.
The Prime Minister is absolutely right to request that Reform UK conducts an investigation.
And Reform is pro-Putin, and that is why they undermine. Well, they've just been convicted.
Yesterday, the House of Commons practically came together to reveal the shocking truth about Reform UK's support for Russia when the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, made a statement on the G20 and Ukraine, where Starmer spent 10 minutes talking about delivering on the situation about the war in Ukraine. Now, nothing really interesting was really said. That was not until the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, did say something that was very interesting.
But, Mr. Speaker, given that in the last fortnight the Royal Navy has intercepted 2 Russian ships in our waters, and with Russian spy ships pointing lasers at RAF pilots, it is a disgrace that Reform are still blaming NATO for Russia's aggression. Although perhaps it should come as no surprise when their former leader in Wales was sent to prison last week for taking bribes from Putin.
Well, clearly, Kemi Badenoch has grown some balls and realised that she can criticise Reform UK once in a while. Well, maybe because it really wasn't the right time to attack the Prime Minister, and you know our Kemi. Kemi isn't Kemi if she isn't having an unhinged rant about someone or something at the dispatch box, is she? But brace yourselves out there, Starmer and Badenoch were in total agreement for once.
Can I join her in her comments about Reform, because it is shocking that a senior official, the leader in Wales, has been jailed for over 10 years, a very significant sentence, for pro-Russia bribes. That is extraordinary. And that is why I say, and I say again, there should be that the Reform leadership should have the courage to launch an investigation. How on earth did that happen in their party? And what other links are there? But today, and this statement and the question across the House will reinforce once again that Reform, with their pro-Putin approach, would have absolutely no role in bringing allies together on important issues across the globe.
Well, slap my thighs and call me Doreen. Reform UK are supporters of Russia. Also, where's Nigel Farage? Something tells me he's trying to keep a low profile. But anyway, after Labour MP Emily Thornberry had asked her question, it was then they turned for Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper, and she asked a very interesting question.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is absolutely right to request that Reform UK conducts an investigation into pro-Russian bribes. Can I ask the Prime Minister whether he will also then commission a second Russia report into Russian interference in our democracy?
Good question. Well, will you, Prime Minister?
In relation to Reform, I completely agree with her comments. It is extraordinary that in this chamber we're having a debate about a war which Russia has perpetrated on Ukraine, and a senior member of Reform is convicted of pro-Russian bribes. In relation to interference with democracy, it is of deep concern. On the assets, look, we are having extensive discussions about this, including at the G20 and elsewhere, in relation to what more can be done, and making progress. It's not straightforward, as she will know, but it is the subject of very extensive discussions to see what more we can do.
Not much of a committal there was there for another Russia report. Come on, Keir, grow some balls and say yes. Now, as people were calling out the Nazi pro-Russian party, I did notice our plastic patriot, little Dick Tice, was getting more and more animated with all the calling out, and I did wonder if he was going to get a question. Well, he did. Now, did he admit that Reform should start an investigation into their Russian stance? But before that, Labour MP, Mr Alex Barros-Curtis, stuck the boot in.
Alex Barros-Curtis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very proud to represent Cardiff West in this place. Nathan Gill, the former leader of Reform UK in Wales, was elected to serve the people of Wales in the European Parliament. But as we now know, he served not only himself but the interests of Russia, having admitted not one, not two, but 8 counts of bribery, and is now serving 10.5 years in imprisonment. So I know the Prime Minister will join me in condemning this treachery, but will he also join me in demanding that the leadership of Reform UK, who unfortunately typically can't be present here today, launch that independent investigation into this act of treason?
Hear, hear.
Well, he puts the point very powerfully, and it must be uncomfortable to hear this for the Reform Party. This is completely undermining our national security. It can't be right for a political party represented in this House to simply close their eyes and ears to this. There has to be an investigation. There has to be a level of reassurance that there aren't other links to Russia within the Reform Party and how this came about in the first place. And so this question is very good. It should be deeply uncomfortable for Reform MPs to be sitting in this House, hearing this, knowing they're sitting on their hands and doing absolutely nothing about it.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I remind the House that last year I personally donated a 5-figure sum, bought a pickup truck, filled it with first aid supplies, and drove it with other friends and colleagues to Ukraine and donated it to the brave soldiers of Ukraine. So my support and Reform support for Ukraine has been rock solid, Prime Minister, throughout. And it is important that this House is united, which it is, Madam Deputy Speaker. And last week, when the 28-point plan emerged, we rejected it immediately. Just yesterday, Prime Minister, I was with a Ukrainian delegation, and we were talking specifically about the leverage that the European nations has with regard to the frozen assets, the majority of which, of course, are here in Europe. So would I urge the Prime Minister, amongst all of the noise, to utilise that leverage, because that, I think, is one of the most powerful negotiating points that the West has against the vile dictator Putin.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he could have stood up and said that Reform's seen sense and decided they will have an investigation in relation to what happened in this bribery case. And I don't doubt that he drove and personally committed in relation to support. But the simple fact is this: you can't be pro-Putin and pro-Ukraine. You have to decide between the two, and Reform is pro-Putin, and that is why they undermine. Well, they've just been convicted, a 10-year sentence for bribe, for what? Taking pro-Russian bribes. It couldn't be clearer than that, and an unwillingness to say we need to investigate how on earth that happened. Can he not see the inconsistency in what he's saying?
Well, your wish is Nigel Farage's command, so to speak. Now, will you start an investigation to root out Russian stooges and traitors to this country?
The desire to arm the rebels in Syria has been the unnecessary provocation of Vladimir Putin. This EU empire, ever seeking to expand, stated its territorial claim on the Ukraine some years ago. Just to make that worse, of course, some NATO members said they too would like the Ukraine to join NATO. We directly encouraged the uprising in the Ukraine that led to the toppling of the President Yanukovych, and that led, of course, in turn to Vladimir Putin reacting. And the moral of the story is, if you poke the Russian bear with a stick, don't be surprised when he reacts. Now, just to continue with that, today we are rushing through an association agreement at undue speed with the Ukraine, and as we speak, there are NATO soldiers engaged in military exercises in the Ukraine. Have we taken leave of our senses? Do we actually want to have a war with Putin? Because if we do, we're certainly going about it the right way. Perhaps we ought to recognise that the West now faces the biggest threat and crisis to our way of life that we have seen for over 70 years. The recent beheadings of the British and American hostages graphically illustrates the problem. And of course we have our own citizens from our own countries engaged in that struggle too. In the war against Islamic extremism, Vladimir Putin, whatever we may think of him as a human being, is actually on our side. I suggest we grow up. I suggest we recognise the real threat facing all of our countries, communities and societies. We stop playing war games in the Ukraine and we start to prepare a plan to help countries like Syria, like Iraq, like Kenya, like indeed Nigeria, to try and help them to deal with the real threat that faces us. Let's not go on provoking Putin, whether we like him or not.
Oh, that's the wrong clip, editing DB. Play the clip of Farage demanding an investigation to root out traitors of this country, please.
A couple of months ago, which world leader did I admire? And I said Vladimir Putin as an operator, particularly the way he managed to stop the West getting militarily involved in Syria.
We ourselves in the European Union provoked the conflict through our territorial expansionism in the Ukraine, and the moral of the story is if you poke the Russian bear with a stick, don't be surprised when he reacts.
Ever westwards expansion of both NATO and the European Union has been seen by many Russians to be provocative, to be encircling, and Putin has managed to use that to mobilise Russian opinion to say, hey, these guys are threatening us, they're threatening Russian-speaking people in other countries. So yes, we've got a lot wrong, and we did start much of this.
Please play the correct clip, editing DB.
Will you instigate an investigation in your party to see if there is any other pro-Russian influence?
We are not a police force. Should there be...
You are the leader of the party, though.
Yes, and if you listen, I'll tell you what I think. I think given, we've seen the Nathan Gill case, given since then we've learnt that a Labour MP took £500,000 for his office costs and campaigning costs from a now known Chinese agent, is there a problem through British politics? There is. Is it extensive? I doubt it, but I don't know. Should we ask somebody with actual authority to investigate it? Yes.
So would you support calls then for a UK-wide investigation?
I think that's right, and I think there are doubts on all sides right at the moment. So yes, that would be a good thing to do.
But you're not going to instigate that investigation yourself as party leader. But you are party leader.
Yeah, I haven't got a police force. I haven't got access. I can't access your phone messages. I can't access your emails. Unless I can do that, I can't investigate. You've got to have somebody with investigatory powers.
What questions have you personally asked of people in your party?
Well, I've asked everybody, have you ever taken money you shouldn't have taken from anybody? And no one said yes.
OK, and is that good enough for you? You're taking them at face value?
And what do you think Keir Starmer's doing? And what do you think Kemi Badenoch's doing?
OK, but this question is for you. Those are questions for them on a different
I am not a police officer. I cannot access emails or phone messages. I can't investigate other than asking people. And I would point out to you that this is an embarrassment for UKIP. It's a very minor embarrassment for Reform.
Well, he was party leader in Wales.
For how many weeks?
Well, you're still party leader. That's irrelevant.
For a very brief period of time. He's not been with us for a very, very long time.
Can you guarantee there's been no contact between Mr Gill and current members of Reform at any point since his arrest up to what we saw last week?
I've had no engagement with him, and nobody in my leadership team has had any engagement with him whatsoever.
But you can't rule out that there might be people in the party who have spoken to him since his arrest?
Nobody in authority.
Thank you, editing DB. Finally. Now, I'm no political mastermind by any stretch of the imagination, but something tells me he's not too keen on an investigation. And why should he? Especially when he severely cross-examined them and asked them tough, robust, soul-searching, difficult questions like, have you ever taken money from people you shouldn't have? Well, that's it. I'm sold. Reform totally clean and are not a threat to national security.
When we're looking at the UK, do you want to identify any British actors that you would say have been successfully captured by Russian misinformation?
I have certainly seen a lot of Russian rhetoric coming from Mr. Farage, and I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anyone in this room. And I would say his narratives about Ukraine converge also with the Trump administration's narratives. And there's also convergence on fighting disinformation. And I think we'll get to that a little bit later on, but just to kind of preview it, certainly Mr. Farage seems to be an important ally of the Trump administration's in tearing down counter disinformation programming, not only in the UK, but in the EU as well.
Oh, well, at least he's not a rabid anti-Semite and a racist, Refuck supporters.
Did you racially abuse fellow pupils when you were at school?
No, this is 49 years ago, by the way. 49 years ago. Have I ever tried to take it out on any individual on the basis of where they're from? No.
At school, categorically on the record, you did not racially abuse fellow people.
I would never, ever do it in a hurtful or insulting way.
That's not quite the same as not doing it.
It's 49 years ago. It's 49 years ago.
What difference does it? What difference does the time make?
Isn't it? Well, I just entered my teens. Can I remember everything that happened at school? No, I can't. Have I ever been part of an extremist organisation or engaged in direct, unpleasant personal abuse, genuine abuse, on that basis? No.
You're not quite. That's very, very caveated. You're not quite ruling this out. The question is, did you ever racially abuse fellow pupils in school?
No.
You've caveated it with a hurtful way.
Not with intent.
What do you mean not with intent? I don't understand what you mean by not with intent. What does that mean?
You wouldn't do.
But what does that mean?
No.
No what?
No. I have never directly really tried to go and hurt anybody.
Oh, well, I suppose he did try not to be a massive racist in a hurtful or insulting way. But anyway, what do you guys think? Should there be an investigation into the Russian stooges called Reform UK? Or has Putin's poodle's robust, soul-searching, difficult questions been enough to convince you that all the traitors have been rooted out and shown the door, none of them are taking Russian rubles? Was the House of Commons pile-on justified? Or can you be a massive racist while not doing it in a hurtful or insulting way? Let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.